In 1935, agents of the United States federal government walked into every major American city. They carried maps, they carried clipboards, and they carried a color-coding system that would quietly determine who ate well in this country for the next 100 years. Neighborhoods rated or colored green. They were almost entirely white. Neighborhoods rated D were colored red. They were almost entirely black. Banks used those maps to deny mortgages. Insurance companies used them to deny coverage. And grocery chains used them to decide where to build stores and where to never set foot. That was decision 1. There are 9 more. Number 7 involves a corporation that entered black communities, destroyed every competing grocery store, then packed up and left, taking the food and the jobs with them. Number 3 involved a federal agency that stopped responding to discrimination complaints from black farmers for 14 straight years, on purpose, with a memo to prove it. And the final decision on this list involves a legal mechanism so quiet, so buried in property law, that it has stripped black families of over 12 million acres of farmland since 1910, and is still happening today. 10 decisions, 10 different ways the same result was produced. A black community loses its food. A corporation gains its profit. Subscribe, because what you are about to hear has been sitting in federal documents, court settlements, and corporate earnings reports for decades. Nobody put in a list before now. Here is decision 1. Before we count these decisions, you need to understand one thing. A food desert is not an accident. It is not poverty just happening to look a certain way. It is not a neighborhood that failed. A food desert is the final result of a chain of deliberate choices made by people with power. Choices that removed food from black communities and redirected the money somewhere else. Not once, not twice, 10 separate times, different decades, different industries, different mechanisms. Same outcome every single time. A 2023 Brookings Institution study found that even wealthy black neighborhoods, communities with money, were less likely to have a grocery store within 1 mile than wealthy. White neighborhoods, same income, different access. That gap was not created by the market. It was created by decisions. And the first decision was made before most of your grandparents were born. In 1935, a federal agency called the Home Owners Loan Corporation sent train appraisers into 239 American cities. Their job was to assess neighborhood risk for mortgage lending. They graded every neighborhood A through D. Grade A neighborhoods were coded green. Desirable, investment ready, almost entirely white. Grade D neighborhoods were coded red. Hazardous, too risky to invest in, almost entirely black. The appraisers did not hide their reasoning. Their written assessments described black neighborhoods as infiltrated by what they called inharmonious racial groups. The paperwork is still in the National Archives. Anyone can read it today. Banks use those red maps to deny home loans. Without home loans, black families could not build equity. Without equity, neighborhoods could not attract commercial investment. And grocery chains, looking at the same data banks were using, made the same calculation. No investment, no stores. Researchers at the University of Connecticut found in 2020 that the neighborhoods marked red on those 1935 HOLC maps still have fewer supermarkets today than redline neighborhoods in comparable cities. One map, drawn by government agents, signed off by federal officials, and its consequences are still on your grocery receipt. In 1949, Congress passed the Housing Act and handed local governments a weapon. They called it urban renewal. Critics called it what it was, Negro removal. Between 1949 and 1974, the federal government funded the demolition of entire black business. Districts across America, not empty lots, thriving commercial corridors, grocery stores, markets, restaurants, pharmacies, all of it bulldozed. In Cincinnati, the Kenyon Bar Project displaced 4,953 families. Over 97% of them were black. In San Francisco's Fillmore District, nearly 1,000 black-owned businesses and 5,000 homes were destroyed. The city called it blight removal. The people who live there called it home. In Durham, North Carolina, the Haiti District, a self-sufficient black neighborhood with its own full economy, was carved in half by a federal highway. When Dixie closed, the grocery store that replaced it did not come for 30 years. A 1964 House of Representatives report estimated that urban renewal displaced 66,000 families per year at its peak. Researchers who have studied the program concluded that the majority were black. The construction firms collected federal contracts. The private developers who rebuilt the cleared land made fortunes. The families who were displaced received relocation notices. And the food access those communities had built over decades gone, replaced by parking lots and highways. When white families left the cities for the suburbs in the 1950s, the grocery chains made a decision. They followed A&P, Kroger, Safeway. One by one, the major national chains closed their inner-city stores and opened new ones in the suburbs. The inner-city stores were not failing. They still had customers. Those customers were just not worth as much per square foot as the suburban ones. Between 1978 and 1984 alone, Safeway closed more than 600 stores across the country. Researchers at the University of Connecticut studied where those closures fell. The pattern was clear. The stores that closed were disproportionately located in the same neighborhoods that had been colored red on the 1935 HOLC maps. The maps drew the boundary in 1935. The grocery chains enforced it in 1978. Safeway's stock price rose after the closures. Wall Street rewarded the company for abandoning black communities. That is not an interpretation. That is in the earnings reports. The term researchers now use for this pattern is supermarket redlining. Department Gills, assistant professor at the University of Connecticut, described it plainly. We saw supermarket redlining in black neighborhoods. Chain supermarkets either closed down, relocated to suburban areas, or chose not to open in neighborhoods with high black populations. One decision, made in boardrooms, and a generation of black families lost access to fresh food, not because of poverty, but because of corporate strategy. Let me stop here for a moment. 3 decisions in 3 different institutions: a federal mapping agency, a federal housing program, and a corporate retail strategy. All 3 produced the same result. Black communities lost their food access. And every time that happened, someone else's balance sheet improved. The first 3 decisions built the cage. What came next filled it. In 1983, the United States Department of Agriculture shut down its own Office of Civil Rights. They stopped responding to discrimination complaints from black farmers. For 14 years, this was not a budget cut. The office was not eliminated. It was deliberately made non-functional. Staff were reassigned. Complaints were filed and ignored. A 1997 class action lawsuit would later document exactly what happened during those 14 years. The USDA had been systematically denying loan applications from black farmers, delaying them, losing them, rejecting them on technicalities, while approving white applications for the same programs. And with the Office of Civil Rights dismantled, there was no internal mechanism to flag it, investigate it, or stop it. In 1920, There were 925,000 black-operated farms in the United States. By 1997, there were fewer than 18,000. That collapse did not happen because black farmers were bad at farming. It happened because the federal agency that controlled their access to loans decided, in writing, to stop protecting them. The lawsuit that followed, Pigford versus Glickman, became the largest civil rights settlement in American history at the time. The settlement was $2.3 billion. A federal judge noted in his ruling that the USDA had engaged in, and I quote from the court record, a long pattern of discrimination against African American farmers. The farmland that was lost was worth many times more than the settlement. Internal marketing documents from Philip Morris, obtained through litigation, show that the company specifically targeted black urban neighborhoods as high-value markets throughout the 1970s and 1980s. The reasoning was explicit. These were areas with high foot traffic, limited retail competition, and no established health food presence to push back. Tobacco billboards appeared in black neighborhoods at rates 5 to 10 times higher than in comparable white neighborhoods. Studies published in the American Journal of Public Health documented the saturation strategy in cities including Baltimore, Detroit, and Chicago. Liquor stores replaced grocery stores on the same commercial blocks. Researchers at the University of California found that black neighborhoods had significantly more alcohol outlets per capita than white neighborhoods, not because of higher demand, but because of targeted supply decisions made by distributors and retailers who saw vacated commercial space as opportunity. The grocery store had sold food or replaced its sold products with no nutritional value and documented health consequences. The corporations that made these decisions understood exactly what they were entering. They had the demographic data. They had the market research. They knew these were communities that had already been denied alternatives. They went in anyway, because the profit margins were excellent. Fast food chains did not create food deserts, but they made billions from them, and they designed their expansion strategy accordingly. Studies consistently show that black neighborhoods have more fast food restaurants per capita than white neighborhoods, even when income levels are identical. The Brookings Institution, the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, and the Centers for Disease Control have all documented this pattern. The fast food industry's internal logic is straightforward. When there is no grocery store, there is no competition for the food dollar. Every meal a family would have cooked at home becomes a transaction at a drive-through window. McDonald's, Burger King, Popeyes, their location data tells a story their marketing budgets would rather not tell. These companies lobbied against full-service grocery store incentives in underserved areas. They lobbied against zoning changes that would have made it easier to bring fresh food retail into food deserts. They had no financial incentive for the food desert to end. A food desert is not a problem for the fast food industry. It is a business model. 6 decisions in. Government drew the maps. Government bulldozed the neighborhoods. Corporations followed. White customers to the suburbs. The government stopped protecting black farmers. Tobacco and alcohol companies moved into the vacuum. Fast food built permanent infrastructure in the gap. Every single decision was made by a named institution. Every single decision produced measurable profit for someone else. But here is what most people do not know. The 3 decisions that followed did not happen decades ago. They are happening right now. In cities you know, with corporations you shop at today. Dollar General and Dollar Tree have opened over 35,000 stores across America. Their expansion strategy in black and low-income neighborhoods is documented and deliberate. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance studied it. The Brookings Institution studied it. City councils across the country have passed emergency ordinances because of it. Here's how it works. Dollar stores identify a neighborhood with one surviving independent grocery store. They open multiple locations nearby, sometimes 2 or 3 stores within blocks of each other. They use Wall Street capital to price products below cost, a practice called predatory pricing, until the independent grocer cannot compete. The grocer closes. Now the dollar store is the only food retail in the neighborhood, and dollar stores carry almost no fresh produce, no fresh meat, no dairy, only processed, shelf-stable products, often sold in deceptive package sizes that cost more per ounce than the grocery store they replaced. Tulsa City Councilor Vanessa Hall Harper enacted the first municipal ordinance restricting dollar store expansion in 2018. She described the pattern directly. These dollar stores do not proliferate white communities. She was right. The Brookings Institution confirmed in 2023 that dollar stores are disproportionately concentrated in Black and Latino neighborhoods, including high-income Black neighborhoods. At least 54 American cities have now passed restrictions on dollar store expansion. Those cities understood what the dollar store industry understood first. This was never about serving a community. It was about replacing its food supply with something profitable and nutritionally useless. Walmart enters a Black community. They announce jobs and affordable food. The local, independent grocery stores cannot compete with Walmart's pricing. They close. Then Walmart decides the store is underperforming. Walmart closes. The neighborhood now has no grocery store, not the independent stores that were there before. Walmart, not Walmart, nothing. This cycle has played out in cities across America, in Chicago, in Washington, D.C., in Baltimore. Communities that traded their independent food ecosystem for a Walmart and then lost both. In 2016, Walmart announced it was closing 154 stores in the United States. A disproportionate number were in low-income and minority communities. The company cited financial performance. The communities cited a grocery desert. Walmart collected years of revenue from these communities, extracted the profit, paid their shareholders, and left. In 2016, Whole Foods opened a store in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood. Englewood is one of the most underserved Black communities in the city. It has been called a food desert for decades. The opening was covered as a triumph of corporate responsibility. National press, civic celebrations, a model for how corporations could invest in communities that have been abandoned. In 2022, Whole Foods, now owned by Amazon, closed the store. The official reason: the location did not meet Amazon's financial expectations. The community lost their grocery store twice. First, when the original stores left during the decades of disinvestment. Then, when the corporate savior decided that their community was not profitable enough to save. The Englewood Whole Foods lasted 6 years. The food desert it briefly filled is still there. Every decision on this list traces back to one thing: land. In 1910, Black families in America owned 16 million acres of farmland. Today, that number is under 4.5 million. That is not a decline. That is an erasure. And a significant portion of it happened through a legal mechanism most people have never heard of called heirs property. When a landowner dies without a formal will, under heirs property law, the land passes jointly to all descendants. Any single heir, even one who never lived on the land, can petition a court for a forced partition sale. The land is then auctioned. Land speculators and timber companies discovered this vulnerability over a century ago. They buy a single heir's share. They petition for partition. The family gets forced off land they have. owned for generations, sold at auction for a fraction of market value. The USDA itself acknowledged that heirs' property is the leading cause of involuntary black land loss in the American South. Families that owned farmland could have grown their own food, could have built economic independence, could have maintained community food infrastructure regardless of what any corporation or federal agency decided to do. They lost the land first. Everything else on this list followed. 10 decisions. Government mapped the boundaries. Government bulldozed the businesses. Corporations followed the profitable customers out. The government stopped protecting the farmers. Predatory industries moved into the vacuum. Fast food built permanent infrastructure. Dollar stores killed the last independent grocers. Walmart played bait and destroy. Whole Foods played savior and left. And land speculators have been stripping generational farmland through the legal system since 1910. Every link in this chain connects to the next. And at every link, someone signed a document. Someone ran a projection. Someone looked at the numbers and decided this was worth doing. The next time you drive through a neighborhood and see a dollar store or a grocery store, should be, you're not looking at poverty. You're looking at the end of a chain. And now you know every decision that built it. If this video changed how you see a food desert, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, which of these 10 decisions hit you the hardest? These decisions were made in silence for 90 years. The least we can do is say their names out loud.